They say the Alpha King hasn't slept in months. They say his wolves search every corner of his land, from the northern mountains to the deep valleys, seeking the woman who left him. They say his once golden eyes have turned darker, colder, feral, and that even his closest commanders lower their gaze when he enters the room. They say the land itself is dying because of it. Crops withering, rivers drying, livestock refusing to breed. It's as though the earth can feel the unraveling of its king, and it's following suit. But no one knows why.
They don't know about me.
The woman whose name he dares not speak. Welcome to Floxy's Shifter Romance Tales. Before we dive in, I'd love your support. Can we hit 200 likes on this story? Also, subscribe, drop a comment, and tell me where you're listening from. Your engagement means everything to me. Now, let's begin. My name is Isla Montgomery, and this is the story of how I vanished the night the Alpha King chose another, and how the most powerful Alpha in 200 years has burned his realm to the ground in a desperate bid to bring me back. 4 months ago, the Grand Hall of Ashen Keep was alive with light and life. 10,000 candles burned brightly, filling the great hall with a warm, flickering glow. The representatives of every noble family in the land had gathered, witnessing an ancient tradition, the choosing of the queen. The Alpha King of Venmore was to select his bride, a ceremonial event steeped in history. One that would determine the fate of the kingdom, the future of the ruling bloodlines, and the heart of the Alpha King himself. I was not supposed to be there. I was nothing, a healer's orphan raised by an aunt who cleaned linens. No title, no lands, no wealth, no worth to the grander scheme of things. My place at that grand event was a fluke, an accident, a decision made by Draven Ashmore, Alpha King of Venmore, who had found me bleeding in the northern forest months before, after a rogue wolf had attacked me. He had saved my life, stayed by my side as I healed, and then, he had whispered words I thought were impossible for someone like me to hear. "You are my mate, Isla," he had said. I knew at the moment I touched you. I hadn't believed him at first, how could I? I was a commoner, a healer, but over time, Draven's actions proved his words true. His wolf had known me before he did. For months, we met in secret, in hidden chambers, moonlit clearings, and quiet moments when the world belonged only to us. He had marked me, given me a symbol of our bond. A bite on my shoulder, hidden beneath my clothes, a promise to me that could never be erased. And when the day of the choosing came, I was ready to believe. He promised me he would stand by me. He promised me he would find a way to make me his queen, despite the demands of the council and the politics of the kingdom. But when it mattered most, in the very hall where I thought I would be crowned, everything fell apart. The sound of drums thundered through the hall, filling the air with anticipation. My heart beat in my chest like a war drum, each thump a reminder of the moment that would change everything. I stood on the eastern balcony above the grand hall, my fingers gripping the stone railing. Below me, 5 women in ceremonial white walked toward the dais where Draven stood, his black attire sharp against the flickering candlelight. They were the daughters of the 5 noble houses, all trained from birth for this very moment. Each of them beautiful, powerful, and poised. But it was Siren Delane who stole my breath. She was the daughter of the oldest house in Venmore, and it was said she had the bloodline to claim the crown. Her beauty was otherworldly, silver hair that shimmered like the moonlight, eyes as cold and unforgiving as frozen amethyst. And as I stood there, watching her ascend to the dais with grace and power, I felt a burn on my shoulder, the mark he had given me flaring with a sharp, unrelenting heat. Draven had promised me. He had sworn to me that no matter the political complications, no matter the pressures of the council, I would be his queen. But now, standing at the edge of the great hall, my heart sank, and I realized just how wrong I had been to believe in him. Siren stood beside him on the dais, her hand outstretched to the king. Draven's golden eyes met hers, his expression unreadable. I watched him take her hand, and my heart shattered in that moment. The cheer that erupted from the hall seemed to echo from every corner of the kingdom. The great houses were delighted. The nobles clapped, and the air was filled with the sound of approval. But my world was crumbling. Draven's gaze met mine in that split second before he turned away. The moment before his fingers closed around Siren's, I saw it. His eyes, so full of fear. He was screaming silently, but no one could hear him. His wolf was screaming, too, and so was mine. In the silence of that moment, everything changed. I ran. I didn't think. I didn't pack. I didn't leave a note. I simply ran. Through the servants' corridors, past the kitchens, out the hidden staircase behind the keep's lower quarters. Through the postern gate, into the biting cold of the northern wind. The wind carried the first frost of winter, and I felt it like a slap to the face. I wore only the thin green dress Draven had once said he loved to see me in. A dress I had worn to watch him choose another. I ran until my legs gave out, my breath coming in shallow gasps, until Ashen Keep's lights were just a faint glow behind the trees. I collapsed by the Silverthorn River, falling to my knees as the cold earth beneath me seemed to freeze the very breath in my lungs. It hurt. It burned. It felt as though my body was breaking in two. And then I pressed my hand against my stomach.
2 lives.
2 lives I hadn't planned for. 2 lives that now had no place in this cruel world. Draven's world. I whispered to them then, softly, so that no one could hear. I will not let them take you from me. I will not let them know you exist. Because I understood the truth then, a truth I had never wanted to face. If anyone discovered that the Alpha King's true mate, his commoner mate, carried his heirs, the entire kingdom would explode. The 5 ruling houses would tear themselves apart over the legitimacy of those children. And Siren? She would do everything in her power to make sure my children never saw the light of day. I had to disappear. I would disappear. And with that, I fled into the night. I didn't look back. Not once. Running from Ashen Keep, from Draven, from everything that had once felt like my destiny, was both terrifying and liberating. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. There would be no turning back.
Not now.
Not ever. I didn't know where I was going, but the instinct to flee was stronger than the rational part of my mind, which told me I should have stayed, confronted Draven, and demanded an explanation. Instead, I kept running, my heart aching with every step, my breath catching in the cold air as I pushed my legs to move faster, further. I didn't stop until my legs were screaming in protest, and even then, it was only to collapse at the edge of the Silverthorn River, its icy water whispering against the rocks below. The weight of everything I had left behind crashed over me, suffocating in its intensity. I pressed my hand against my stomach, feeling the swell of life growing inside me. 2 lives. 2 tiny, fragile lives I wasn't sure I was ready to protect. But I had to. I had no choice. The first night I spent alone, away from Ashen Keep, I curled up beneath a thick patch of evergreens on the bank of the river, my knees drawn to my chest, the frigid air biting through my thin dress. I had no cloak, no warm blankets. The cold seeped into my bones, and I shivered, but there was no comfort to be found in the warmth of others anymore. I had pushed away everything I knew, everything I loved, to keep my unborn children safe. I couldn't trust the kingdom anymore. And I certainly couldn't trust Draven. At least, not the man he had become. I thought of the moment his eyes had met mine. I had seen it. He had tried to speak, to reach for me, but the magic of the blood covenant had shut him down. I had seen it in his eyes, the fear, the terror. But I had also seen the way his hand had taken Siren's, the finality of it, and it had shattered me. How could I trust a man who had chosen her? Chosen the bloodline. Chosen politics. That first night, I didn't sleep.
How could I?
Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Draven's face. His expression, blank and void of the warmth I had come to rely on. I remembered the softness of his touch, the way he would trace my fingers with his, the way he had sworn to me that we were meant to be. He had promised me a future, but now, standing alone in the cold wilderness, I couldn't even recognize the man who had made those promises. The king who had once cradled me in his arms had chosen his duty over me. And now it was too late to take that back. When the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of lavender and rose, I rose from my makeshift bed, my muscles stiff from the cold. I didn't linger. I couldn't. Not while my children were with me. My first priority was to protect them, even if that meant leaving everything I had ever known behind. I walked for hours, following the river southward. The world was quiet, the only sound the rush of water beneath my feet, the occasional crackle of dried leaves underfoot. But I didn't let the silence lull me into a sense of safety. Not yet. Eventually, I came upon a small village, Thornhaven. It wasn't marked on any maps, but the road leading to it was well-worn. The village sat nestled between thick woods, its cottages huddled close together like old friends. The air here was warmer, the land more fertile. But the people who lived here knew nothing of the political tensions in the kingdom, and that was precisely why I had to be careful. I kept my head down, wrapped my hair in a loose knot, and pulled my coat tighter around my body. There was no need to draw attention to myself, especially with the way the king's wolves were likely combing every village in the kingdom for me. I found the healer's hut quickly, the elderly woman tending to her herbs and roots in the front yard. Her name was Isla, and she had an air about her that told me she was someone who could be trusted. I approached cautiously, watching the villagers who passed by, noting their lack of suspicion. "Can I help you?" Isla asked as I approached, her weathered face softening as she noticed my weary expression. I'm looking for work," I said quietly, my voice thin from the cold and the exhaustion of the last few days. "I've some knowledge of herbs. I can help with healing." She studied me for a moment, and I thought she might turn me away. But instead, she simply nodded. "I could use an extra pair of hands. You're welcome to stay and help with the villagers." I settled into Thornhaven quietly. The villagers were kind, though their curiosity about me was constant. They asked few questions, but their eyes said everything. They wanted to know my story, why I was so far from the Northern Kingdom, why I had no family, why I never spoke of the past. I told them little, claiming I had lost my husband in a border skirmish and that I was simply trying to find a place to heal. No one questioned me further, and I was grateful for it. With every passing day, my body grew rounder with Draven's children. My pregnancies were barely noticeable at first, hidden beneath the layers of my loose gowns and the flowing fabrics I wore to hide the mark on my shoulder, but as the weeks wore on, it became more difficult to hide. My shape was undeniable, but despite my careful efforts to keep my past hidden, my mark did not disappear. It stayed with me, searing against my skin every time I thought of Draven. It had once burned with love and passion, a promise made in a secret corner of the kingdom. But now it burned with the force of something deeper, something primal. It was as though the land itself had a pulse, and I could feel it, feel Draven's presence calling to me across the distance. I had been in Thornhaven for 3 months before the news came. It came with the evening traveler, a merchant passing through the village with news that made my blood run cold. "The king has lost his mind," the merchant said, shaking his head as he passed around bread and salted meat. "Draven Ashmore's wolves are everywhere, searching for someone. A woman. He won't say her name, won't say why." I froze, the bread halfway to my mouth. My hands trembled. "He's burning everything to the ground looking for her," the merchant continued, oblivious to the fact that my heart was pounding in my chest. "The crops are failing in the northern fields, livestock are dying in droves. It's like the land itself is sick." "Has he found her?" someone asked. The merchant's face turned grim. "He's desperate. They say he's gone mad. Executed 2 of his own advisors. I think he's searching for someone special. Someone he's tied to, someone he lost." I couldn't breathe.
They were talking about me.
Later that night, I sat by the hearth in Elda's home, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. My breath came in shallow bursts, my mind racing with everything I had just heard. Draven was looking for me. He was searching every corner of his kingdom. He had not given up. But why had he waited so long? Why hadn't he come for me sooner? I closed my eyes, pressing my palm to my stomach, feeling the two lives growing inside of me. They didn't know the world was cruel. They didn't know the danger they were already in. Ren. Elda's voice broke through my thoughts. Are you all right?
I didn't respond. I didn't know what to say.
I had tried to outrun everything. Draven, the kingdom, my past. But now, the reality of it all had come crashing down around me. I had no choice. The king was coming, and I had to be ready. That night, I lay in bed, my hand over my swollen belly, and I finally allowed myself to think of him. Draven. I couldn't fight the pull. Even after everything, even after his choice, I still longed for him. But I was no fool. I had to protect my children. I couldn't go back. And yet, somewhere deep inside me, I knew I couldn't run forever. The weeks that followed the merchant's arrival in Thornhaven were a blur of fear and resignation. I had learned to keep my head down, to avoid any contact with strangers, and to ensure that no one noticed me in the village. Every evening, I worked diligently in Elda's garden, brewing tinctures, preparing remedies for the villagers. The work was simple, but it provided a small sense of control in a world that had suddenly spun out of my grasp. At night, when the moon was high, I would stare at the mark on my shoulder, feeling the weight of the bond that stretched across the kingdom. Draven's presence was as tangible to me as my own heartbeat, his pull drawing me toward him despite the miles that separated us. There were times when I could almost hear his voice, a whisper carried on the wind, his breath a soft hum beneath my skin. But no matter how many times I touched my mark, no matter how many times I pressed my hand to my stomach to soothe the two lives growing inside me, I knew that I could never go back. Not now. Not when everything was at risk. It was a week after the merchant's arrival that the first wolf patrol came to Thornhaven. The night was cold, the air thick with fog as I moved quietly between the villagers' cottages, gathering herbs under the cover of darkness. I had learned to be careful, always aware of the whispers of the wind and the sounds of the forest around me. The wolves had been spotted in the Grey March, but none of them had ventured so close to Thornhaven. Not yet. I was in the clearing behind Elda's cottage, crouched beside a patch of moonwort, when I heard the unmistakable sound of paws on the earth. My breath caught in my throat. The wolves were here. I quickly rose, my heart pounding in my chest. I had heard the rumors, wolves in the area, searching for someone, but I hadn't imagined that they would come this far into the uncharted territories of the Grey March. They had been searching for weeks, scouring the northern forests and southern hills, combing through every settlement and every village. And now they were here. I moved swiftly, ducking behind a large oak tree, my heart racing as I tried to steady my breath. I had to remain calm. The wolves couldn't know I was here. Not yet. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds, the world cast in deep shadows. I squinted into the darkness, waiting for the sounds of the wolves to grow closer. The tension in the air was palpable, like a storm that was just waiting to break. The howls were faint at first, distant, but they quickly grew louder. I counted at least 5 wolves in the distance, their growls low and menacing, as they circled the village. The fur on the back of my neck prickled, my instinct screaming at me to run. But I didn't. I stayed still, crouched low to the ground, hoping that the thick mist and the night's cover would keep me hidden. Suddenly, a flash of silver moved through the trees. My heart stopped. There, in the distance through the haze of fog, stood a man, a wolf in human form. His eyes glinted in the darkness, golden and wild, the same feral glow that Draven's had once possessed. It was him, one of Draven's wolves. I should have run. I should have turned and fled, but my feet were frozen to the ground. The bond between us flared with a rush of heat, pulling me toward him. I had to remain hidden, to stay out of his sight. If they found me, if they knew I was here, everything would be over. The man moved closer, his body tense as he sniffed the air, his gaze scanning the area. His eyes flickered toward Elda's cottage, then moved past it, scanning the trees around me. My breath caught. He was getting too close. In that moment, the forest seemed to hold its breath. The wolves, their leader now standing so close, would be able to catch my scent.
They would track me. They always did. I had no time.
I turned and bolted, my legs carrying me as quickly as they could through the thick underbrush. I didn't care where I was going anymore. All that mattered was getting away from him. I pushed through the trees, the brush catching at my skin, my heart racing with each pounding step. I could hear the wolves in the distance howling, getting closer. My mark burned against my skin, a fiery, insistent pulse that seemed to draw the wolves' attention. I could almost hear Draven's voice in my mind, urging me to stop, to wait for him, to return to him. But I couldn't.
Not yet.
I ran until my legs ached, until my breath came in ragged gasps, until the trees began to thin and the landscape opened up to the rolling hills of the gray march. The wolves were still behind me, their howls echoing across the land like a relentless storm, but I pushed on, desperate to outrun them, to escape. By the time the sun began to rise, I had reached the outskirts of a small settlement, a place nestled against the foothills of the southern mountains. It was far from Thornhaven, far from any real threat, or so I thought. I entered the village as quietly as I could, my cloak wrapped tightly around my body, the hood pulled low to shield my face. The villagers were still sleeping, and the streets were empty, the only sounds the distant chirps of birds and the rustle of the wind.
I needed to rest.
To gather my bearings, I found a small inn at the edge of the settlement, its sign hanging crooked above the door. The innkeeper, a woman with kind eyes and graying hair, offered me a bed for the night, no questions asked. That night, as I lay in the bed, I could feel the mark on my shoulder pulsing again, this time with a tenderness that made me ache. The pain wasn't just physical, it was emotional, raw, something that tore at me deep within. I closed my eyes and tried to sleep, but sleep wouldn't come. The image of Draven's face, the terror in his eyes, kept me awake. The next morning, as I walked through the village, I overheard a conversation that sent a chill through my bones. The villagers were talking about the king's search. They spoke of him in hushed tones, of the devastation that had followed in his wake. They spoke of crops failing, of rivers running dry, of animals refusing to breed. "He's tearing the kingdom apart," one of the villagers said, her voice filled with sorrow. "The land itself is dying. It's as though the king's grief is spilling over into the earth." I couldn't stop myself from listening. The pain in her words struck me deeply, and I realized with a start just how far Draven had fallen. The king was dying, not physically but spiritually. The bond that had tied him to the land, the bond that had made him the ruler of Venmore, was unraveling, and with it, the very fabric of the realm itself. The next few days were a blur. I kept to the shadows, hiding from the growing search parties that scoured the land. The wolves were still out there, looking for me, and every time I closed my eyes, I could feel Draven's pull on my soul, his anguish radiating through the bond. But even in my isolation, I couldn't help but wonder, what if I had been wrong? What if Draven hadn't chosen Siren? What if it hadn't been his choice at all? I didn't know what was true anymore. The days blurred together in a haze of unease. My heart, which had once beat in sync with Draven's, now beat alone, trying to find a rhythm in a world that had lost its melody. Every step I took away from Ashen Keep, away from the life I once knew, felt heavier than the last. I had once been the Alpha's secret mate, the woman who would one day sit at his side, the queen of a kingdom. But now, I was nothing but a shadow in a village too small to matter, hiding behind a false name and a false identity. Still, every morning as I woke, feeling the weight of the life I was carrying, I found a new resolve. I couldn't turn back. I wouldn't let the politics of Valdemir, nor the power struggle between noble houses, steal my future. For the first time in months, I realized that I was no longer just fighting for my own survival. I was fighting for the lives of my children. The sun had barely risen when the soft knock on the door of my modest room startled me from my restless sleep. I quickly wiped the remnants of the dream from my eyes. Where Draven's face had appeared, his expression tortured, pleading with me in silence. It was always the same. A cry for help, a whisper on the wind that I could never reach. Come in, I called softly, pulling the thick blanket tighter around my shoulders as I sat up in bed. The innkeeper, an older woman named Mare, stepped inside, her eyes kind but burdened. Ren, I've heard news this morning, she said quietly, her voice low as though the very act of speaking might attract unwanted attention. A messenger came through from the south. They say that the king, he's not well. His health, it's deteriorating. He's sending more and more patrols, and his wolves are in every town, every village. His search, it's become relentless. And I think they're looking for you. I felt a shudder ripple through me at her words. Every part of me wanted to jump to my feet, to run, to flee once again. But my legs, heavy with fatigue and the weight of my secret, refused to obey. How could he have come this far? How could Draven's reach have stretched all the way here, into the shadows of the Grey March? He was hunting me, but why? Why now, after months of silence? Why hadn't he come for me sooner? I don't know what to do, Mare continued, her eyes searching mine for some kind of understanding, some sort of reassurance that I could offer. People are frightened. Some say it's his grief that's causing the land to wither. Others say it's a curse. The crops aren't growing, the rivers are drying, and there's word from the high mountains that the southern provinces are on the brink of rebellion. No one knows how to stop it, Ren. I didn't say anything at first. What could I say? I was the cause of it all. My absence had triggered something within Draven, something that had unhinged him, something that had caused the balance of the kingdom to falter. The king was not just mourning my loss, he was unraveling at the seams. I pressed a hand to my stomach, where the two lives inside me grew, unknowingly tangled in the chaos of their father's grief. They would never know a world of peace. No, their world had already been set alight by the choices I made. I had run to protect them, but what if in doing so, I had only ensured their destruction? I won't go back, I whispered to Mare, my voice barely audible, even to my own ears. I can't. Her gaze softened, but she didn't argue. No one would ask you to, Ren. But you must know, the world out there is changing. People are watching. The wolves are coming closer. And they won't stop until they find you. The next few days were a blur of stolen glances and quiet exchanges. Mare had arranged for me to stay hidden in her cottage, a small, unassuming place tucked into the farthest corner of the village. While the rest of the town carried on as usual, going about their business with eyes trained on the road and whispers on their lips, I remained a ghost. I avoided the market. I avoided the people. I couldn't risk being seen. I couldn't risk drawing attention to myself. Not now, not when the wolves were so close. But the tension was mounting. The very air seemed to vibrate with it. It was a tension I couldn't escape. It was like the moment before a storm breaks, the crackling electricity in the air, the waiting. I was waiting too, waiting for something to change, for something to give.
But what?
What could I do against the weight of an entire kingdom unraveling? I wasn't a queen. I wasn't even an aristocrat. I was an orphan, a healer, someone whose life had been upended by a choice I didn't make. One morning, as I gathered herbs along the edge of the forest near the village, I felt it. The pull. The sudden, undeniable sensation that something had shifted, that something had changed in the air. My mark flared again like a beacon, hot against my skin. I stopped, pressing my hand to my shoulder, but it didn't fade. It was stronger now, more insistent. I tried to calm myself, tried to remind myself that the distance between me and Draven should have been enough to dull the bond. But I knew it wasn't. The truth was, the bond was more than just a connection between two people. It was ancient magic, something older than the kingdoms, older than the royal bloodlines. And it could not be severed so easily. And now it was calling to me. Draven was calling to me. That night, a knock at the door once again stirred me from my restless thoughts. This time Mare didn't wait for me to speak. She came in quickly, her eyes wide with urgency. "They're here," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "The wolves. They've come. A patrol is just down the road." I froze, my body stiffening. My heart thudded painfully in my chest, the beat of it so loud in my ears that it drowned out everything else. I turned to Mare, the weight of the decision pressing on me, sinking deeper into my chest with every breath. I can't hide forever, I said softly, almost as a statement to myself. You can't stay here, Mare said, her voice trembling. Not with them so close. They'll find you. She was right, and deep down I knew it. Where will I go? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I've arranged for you to leave. There's a small path to the south. You can go there, and I know someone who can help you. But the wolves? I questioned. What if they follow me? They will, she admitted, her face grim. But you have to leave. They'll search this place, but they won't find you if you go south. There's a safe house. I'll show you. I hesitated. The idea of running again, of leaving yet another place behind, felt like an insurmountable weight. But what choice did I have? I couldn't stay here.
Not now.
The journey south was fraught with peril, each step I took growing heavier with the fear of being discovered. But the further I got from Thornhaven, the more I felt a sense of resolve settle over me. I wasn't just running anymore. I was fighting for something. For my children. For their future. For my own survival. I had no choice but to keep moving. It wasn't long before I realized how truly deep my bond with Draven ran. Even separated by miles of land, by thick forests, by the relentless pursuit of his wolves, I could still feel him. It was as though the earth itself was calling to me, a rhythm in the air that matched the beat of his heart. It was undeniable. It was unbreakable. And as much as I tried to silence it, to tell myself that I was better off without him, I knew the truth. I was never meant to run from him. I had always been his. And he had always been mine. The road south seemed endless, as if the earth itself had stretched out to separate me from everything I once knew. Days turned into weeks, and I barely noticed the passing of time. All I could focus on was the rhythm of my steps, the quiet hum of the bond that still pulsed beneath my skin, and the way my heart ached with every mile that took me further away from him. The further I ran, the more I realized, no matter how far I went, I would never be free. Draven was still there, still a part of me, his presence never truly absent. It had become a constant ache, like an invisible tether pulling me back to him. But I had made my choice. I had to keep running. For the sake of my children, for the sake of my future, I couldn't let the Alpha King find me. After several days of traveling, I reached the edge of the Grey March, a vast expanse of unclaimed land where no Alpha held dominion, where the laws of Valdemir didn't apply. It was a place of refuge, a sanctuary for those who needed to escape the reach of power, and I had hoped that it would offer me the protection I so desperately needed. But as I crossed into the barren wilderness, I realized that even the Grey March couldn't hide me from my past. I had learned to hide myself well, to mask my scent with herbs and oils that would confuse even the keenest wolf's nose. Yet, as I walked deeper into the desolate land, the nagging feeling that something was wrong began to crawl under my skin. The bond between Draven and I was growing stronger, not weaker. I couldn't explain it. I had thought distance would sever the connection, but instead, the pull only seemed to intensify. I pressed my hand to my stomach, the sharp, insistent pain of my mark pulsing with each step I took. It wasn't just the pain of separation, it was as if the earth itself was responding to the broken bond. The land was dying, and I knew in my bones that it was because of me. I was 2 days into the wilderness when I met him. I had stopped to rest in a small cave, sheltering myself from the biting wind that howled through the Grey March. I had taken refuge beneath a rocky overhang, the weight of my exhaustion settling heavily on my shoulders. The fire I built crackled softly, its warmth offering little comfort against the harsh cold that wrapped itself around me. I had just closed my eyes, the warmth of the fire lulling me into a fitful sleep, when I heard it. The unmistakable sound of movement. The snap of a twig, the shift of a footfall on the ground. I was on my feet in an instant, my hand instinctively reaching for the knife I kept at my side, my pulse racing in my ears. I knew that I shouldn't be surprised. It had been inevitable. Draven's wolves had tracked me across the kingdom. They would find me here, too. But I wasn't ready to face them, not yet. I stepped back into the shadows of the cave, my breath shallow, my body tense, as I waited for the wolf to reveal itself. The rustling outside continued for several moments before the figure emerged into the firelight. A man, tall, muscular, with dark hair that gleamed like polished obsidian in the low light. His eyes, too, glowed with the unmistakable golden hue of an Ashmore wolf, but there was something in them that set him apart. He wasn't just any wolf, he was one of Draven's commanders. I could tell that much from the way he carried himself. He stood just outside the entrance of the cave, his gaze scanning the shadows. His eyes flickered toward me, and for a moment, we locked eyes. I felt a shiver run down my spine, but I didn't let it show. I would not let him see my fear. "I know you're in there," he said, his voice low, carrying the weight of authority. I didn't answer. "I'm not here to hurt you," he continued, his voice softer now, as if sensing my hesitation. "I'm here to speak with you.
Please come out.
We need to talk." I didn't trust him. I didn't trust any of them. But there was something in his tone, something that felt different. It wasn't the cold, calculated command of a man who wanted to drag me back to Ashen Keep. It was something else. Reluctantly, I stepped out of the shadows, my eyes never leaving his. He watched me closely, his golden eyes flicking to the small bundle of herbs at my side, to the knife in my hand, to the way I stood, defensive, ready to flee if necessary. "I'm not here to bring you back," he said, his voice quieter now, almost a whisper. "I'm here because I've been searching for you. For months. I need you to understand something. Draven, he never chose Siren. He didn't have a choice." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What do you mean?" I demanded, my voice shaky despite myself. He met my gaze steadily, his expression grave. "I'm Commander Bren. I've been Draven's closest ally for years. And I'm telling you this because I can't stand seeing him tear apart the kingdom any longer. The man you loved is lost. He doesn't know what's happening to him, but I do. He's under a curse, a blood magic curse that was placed on him by Lord Aldrich Delane." I felt the ground beneath me tilt. A curse? A blood magic curse? I shook my head, trying to clear the fog of confusion. "I don't understand. What are you saying?" Bren took a step forward, his posture tense. "Aldrich Delane wanted Siren to be queen. He knew about Draven's bond with you. He knew the bond was unbreakable, and he used that knowledge to curse Draven, to force him into choosing Siren. The magic, it controlled him, Isla. It controlled his body, his mind. He never wanted to choose her. He was never in control of his actions that night." I took a step back, my mind reeling. But his eyes, I saw the terror in his eyes. I saw him looking at me, trying to scream my name. I thought he had betrayed me. Bren nodded slowly, his expression filled with sorrow. "He didn't betray you. Aldrich's blood magic held Draven captive. He couldn't speak, couldn't act on his own will. For months, he's been fighting against it, trying to find a way to break the spell. But when the curse broke, he was already lost. He's been searching for you ever since." I took a deep breath, trying to process the words he had spoken. It felt like my world had been shattered all over again. The truth had been hidden from me, buried beneath a web of deceit and manipulation. Draven hadn't chosen Siren, hadn't betrayed me. He had been a prisoner in his own body. I could hardly breathe. The weight of the revelation was too much. "Why didn't he come for me?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. "Why didn't he tell me the truth?" Bren lowered his gaze, his voice laced with guilt. "He couldn't. The magic had its hold on him. And when it broke, he went to find you. But by then it was too late. He was already fractured, Isla. He was already losing himself." I closed my eyes, pressing my hands against my temples as the storm of emotions inside me threatened to consume me. "What do you want from me, Bren? Why are you here?" Bren looked at me with a fierce intensity. "Because you're the only one who can save him. You're the only one who can stop the destruction. He can't do it alone. He needs you. And the kingdom needs you." His words hung in the air, like a heavy weight. I wanted to refuse. I wanted to run, to hide, to forget it all. But I couldn't. Not anymore. My children, my unborn children, deserved a future. And Draven, he needed me. I had always known the bond between us was unbreakable, but now, in the face of everything that had happened, it seemed even more vital than before. I had to go back. The weight of Bren's words lingered in the air between us like a storm cloud, the tension thick and almost suffocating. The fire I had managed to keep within me flared again, not with rage, but with something deeper. A helplessness. A yearning. Draven had been trying to reach me, not just physically, but emotionally. The bond we shared was more than just a connection of bodies. It was a force of nature, unyielding and untamable, a tether that could not be severed no matter how far I ran. And now, standing here in this cold cave in the gray march, I was being asked to go back, to face him once more. But how could I? How could I face him knowing he had chosen Siren, knowing that, even though he hadn't meant it, that decision had torn my world apart? The kingdom had become a place of chaos, and I had unknowingly become the cause. I took a slow, steady breath, forcing myself to meet Bren's eyes. "Why did you come to me?" My voice cracked, but I swallowed hard, steadying myself. "Why not just take me back to him?" Bren's expression softened, a mix of sympathy and determination in his golden eyes. "Because you're the key to ending all of this. You're the one he needs, Isla. The curse that binds him, the magic Aldrich placed on him. Only you can undo it. Only you can stop the destruction. Draven is a broken king, torn between his bond with you and the kingdom he is meant to lead. The land itself is withering under the strain of it." I closed my eyes for a moment, feeling the pulse of the bond between us, the burning heat that spread through my veins. It was as if Draven were still here with me, a ghost of his presence that haunted every step I took. The bond refused to release me, no matter how far I ran, no matter how hard I tried to bury it deep inside. I could feel him, even now, but the real question remained, could I trust him again? Could I trust him after everything that had happened? Bren took a step closer, his gaze unwavering. "The kingdom is crumbling, Isla. Draven is losing himself. He's becoming someone he's not. The land, the people, they all feel it. The dying crops, the rivers that run dry, the livestock that refuses to breed, it's all connected to his grief. When an alpha's bond is severed, when their true mate is lost, their connection to the land itself weakens. The power of the Ashmore bloodline, tied so deeply to Venmore's soil, is fading. If you don't return, if the bond isn't healed, the kingdom will fall. And with it, so will the land." I pressed my hand against my stomach again, my mind reeling. It wasn't just the kingdom that was dying, it was the world itself. The land was withering because of me. The weight of it threatened to crush me. "I understand the weight of your choice," Bren said softly. "But I don't think you fully understand the danger. Draven is slipping, Isla. Every day that passes without you, every moment he spends apart from you, the worse it becomes. His control is fading, and soon he'll be beyond saving. If you want him back, the man you once knew, you have to make a choice now." The words struck deep into my heart. I had always known, deep down, that Draven was struggling. But to hear it from Bren, to hear how far gone Draven truly was, sent a wave of dread through me. Could I even recognize him now? Could I bear to see the man who had once held me in his arms, who had whispered promises to me in the quiet moments, reduced to a shadow of himself? Bren's voice broke through my thoughts. "I know it's hard. I know it feels like you've been abandoned, Isla. But I need you to understand, Draven never wanted to choose Siren. It wasn't his fault. The blood magic that controlled him, that cursed him, it's breaking him. But he won't let go. He won't stop fighting for you. He's been searching for you for months, going mad with grief. His wolves have been sent to every corner of the kingdom, scouring the land for any trace of you. And now he's here. He's so close." I felt my heart lurch at his words. "He's here? In the gray march?" Bren nodded.
Yes.
"His patrols have crossed into the gray march. The king is determined to find you. He's come further than he ever has, and he's willing to destroy everything to bring you back. I stood in silence for a long moment, the weight of his words pressing down on me. Could I return? Could I face Draven knowing what had transpired, knowing how much pain he had caused both me and the kingdom? The answer was simple, yet impossible. The truth was, I could never run from him. Not completely. Not when the land itself was calling for us to return. The pull of the bond was too strong, and the responsibility I felt for Draven, for his kingdom, for the lives growing inside me, was overwhelming. I looked at Bren, my voice barely above a whisper. If I go back, what happens then? Bren stepped forward, his gaze steady. When you return, when the bond is reawakened, the land will heal. The power of the Ashmore bloodline will be restored. Draven will regain control of his kingdom, and you will be by his side. The curse will be broken. The magic that binds him will dissipate. But it's not just for Draven's sake. It's for the kingdom, the people, the land. Everything is tied to the bond, Isla. Everything. The weight of his words sank deep into my soul. I was no longer just fighting for Draven. I was fighting for Venmore, for the land that had been my home, and for the lives that would one day inherit this kingdom. Why didn't you tell me this sooner? I demanded, my voice sharp with the frustration I had kept buried for so long. Why did you wait until now? Bren met my gaze, his expression full of regret. We didn't know the truth until recently, Isla. Draven has been searching for you for months, but we didn't understand the magic's full extent. I couldn't explain it to you before, but I can now. And I've come to tell you the truth, to bring you back before it's too late. I took a deep breath, my heart pounding in my chest as the weight of everything I had been running from bore down on me. Draven's search, his grief, the land dying, it was all too much to bear. But despite everything, the pain, the anger, the betrayal, I knew what I had to do. I turned away from Bren, looking out into the misty distance, my eyes clouded with the uncertainty of what lay ahead. The path back to Ashen Keep would not be easy. I would have to face everything I had tried to outrun, everything that had broken me. But if I stayed away, I would lose everything. My children, my future, Draven, and the kingdom itself. Tell him I'm coming, I said softly, the words tasting like ash on my tongue. Bren's expression softened, a flicker of hope in his golden eyes. He'll be waiting for you, and so will the kingdom. It was time to return to the place that had once been my home, to the man who had once promised me the world. But now, that promise was tainted. I didn't know if I could forgive him. I didn't know if I could trust him. But I had to go. I had to try. For the kingdom. For the land. For the future we could still have together. The journey back to Ashenmore Keep was long and treacherous, but I didn't mind. Each step I took, each mile that carried me closer to the kingdom I had fled, seemed to pull me further from the woman I had been when I first ran. The bond pulsed with undeniable urgency, tugging at me like an invisible force, whispering promises of answers, of closure. It was as if I were a piece of a puzzle, and no matter how far I tried to wander, I would always find my way back to the missing part of me, Draven. But as I traveled through the gray march, the air thick with tension, I wondered if the answers I sought were ones I truly wanted to hear. The truth was, I was terrified. I wasn't terrified of Draven. At least, not in the way I had been before. I wasn't scared of facing him, of looking him in the eyes and demanding the truth. No, what terrified me was what the truth might cost me. What would I find when I returned? What had changed in his absence? Would the man I once loved still be there, or would the grief and the blood magic have consumed him entirely? And what of the kingdom? Was I willing to risk everything for a chance at a future I wasn't sure could exist? The more I thought about it, the more I realized that running from Ashenmore Keep had been a way to protect myself from the impossible choice between love and duty. Draven had been king first, and I had been nothing but a commoner, an orphaned healer whose love was always bound to be a liability in the court of politics. The choice had never been mine, not truly. The kingdom had demanded a queen, and Draven had given them one. But now, As the days wore on, and as I grew closer to my destination, I realized something vital. The choice was mine now. And the kingdom itself was waiting for me. I reached the gates of Ashenmoor Keep under the cover of dusk, the sky turning a deep purple as the first stars began to peek through the clouds. The keep loomed ahead of me, its dark stone walls rising like an ancient sentinel guarding the heart of the realm. I stood there for a long moment, feeling the weight of everything that had led me here. The years of love and betrayal, of secrets kept in the dark, of a bond that had never broken despite the world's attempts to tear it apart. I had always thought I would walk through those gates as Draven's queen, standing beside him as his equal. But instead, I was a fugitive, a woman with a child growing in her womb and a past she couldn't outrun. Still, the bond was undeniable. It had brought me back to this very place. I turned to Bren, who had been with me the entire journey, silently watching me struggle with my emotions, his golden eyes never leaving mine. "Are you ready?" he asked, his voice steady, but there was something unspoken in his words, something I could feel, vibrating between us. I wasn't sure what I was ready for, but I nodded anyway. "Let's go." As we walked through the winding paths that led to the keep's grand gates, I couldn't help but notice how everything had changed. The once pristine fields were now dark and withered, the crops no longer growing with the same vigor that they had during my time at Ashenmoor. The once lively gardens outside the keep's walls were now dark and empty, the flowers and shrubs wilted beyond repair. Even the air felt heavier, as though it, too, had lost its energy. The kingdom was dying, and it wasn't just the land, it was Draven. It was the soul of the realm itself. When we arrived at the great hall, the massive stone doors were open, as if they had been waiting for me. The guards stood at attention, their expressions grim, their eyes flicking toward me with a mixture of curiosity and uncertainty. Word had spread that Draven had been in search of me for months, and now that I was here, the very air seemed to shift. Inside, the hall was dimly lit by thousands of flickering candles, casting long shadows against the stone walls. The throne at the end of the room was empty, the heavy weight of its absence pressing on my chest. I didn't have to look far to know who would be sitting there soon. Draven. I tried to steady my breathing as my footsteps echoed through the hall, my heart hammering in my chest. I didn't know what I was expecting. Maybe an apology. Maybe a plea. But what I wasn't prepared for was the raw, untamed pain that radiated from him when he stepped into the hall, his presence filling the room like a tidal wave crashing against the shore. Draven stood at the entrance, his face gaunt, his once strong frame now thinner, harder. His golden eyes, once full of warmth and love, were now dark, empty pools of anguish. His hair was longer, unkempt, and his clothes were more ragged than I had ever seen them. When his eyes met mine, I felt it, the pull, the connection, the bond. He took a slow, unsteady step toward me, and I froze.
Isla.
The single word broke through the silence like a prayer. Draven, I whispered, my voice trembling with the weight of everything that had come before this moment.
What happened to you?
What did they do to you? His gaze never wavered, his body trembling with something fierce, something that went beyond rage. They did this to me, he said hoarsely, his voice cracking with emotion. But it wasn't just Aldrich. It was me. I chose the wrong path. I let them control me. And I destroyed everything. The pain in his voice mirrored my own, a shared ache that seemed to come from the very core of our beings. I never chose her, he whispered, his voice barely audible. I couldn't choose her. I chose you, Isla. I always chose you. My heart clenched in my chest. The weight of his words, of everything he had suffered, felt like 1,000 stones pressing down on me. I know, I said softly, stepping closer to him, my breath catching as I reached out to touch his arm. The bond between us flared, the warmth of it radiating through me as I felt the power of it once again. I know, Draven, but we can't change the past. We can't undo what was done. His hand shot out, grabbing mine, pulling me closer. Then we fight, he said, his voice fierce, his grip tightening around me. We fight for what's left. For the kingdom. For us. My eyes burned with tears I couldn't hold back. But what if the kingdom is beyond saving? I whispered. What if it's too late? Draven's eyes burned with an intensity one hadn't seen in him before. Then we burn it all down, Isla. We burn it down together. The air in the hall was thick with tension, but as I looked into Draven's eyes, I saw the remnants of the man I had once loved. The man who had sworn to protect me, who had held me in his arms and promised me a future. That man was still there. He had not been destroyed by blood magic or political scheming. He had just been lost. And now, I was here to find him.